As promised in the other Little Things video, here is Little Things Battle. You know something I hate, other than silent protagonists? Difficulty by guess and check. I have no problem getting a game over that I can look back at and say, yep, I fucked that up. I don't feel this way when I game over from attacking a new enemy with an element they reflect, because the only way I have to discern this fact is to just try it and see. Yeah, sometimes you can make educated guesses based on what the shadow looks like or what elements it attacks with, but you're still ultimately guessing and will sometimes be punished for guessing wrong. I don't find this to be fun or engaging difficulty, just frustrating and annoying. Honestly, my preferred fix is to just not fucking hide them. Let you see them all the first time you fight an enemy. And this is effectively how I played the game. Call it cheating if you want, but I have no doubt that I enjoyed the game more because I looked up Shadow's resistances online whenever I came across a new one. And that's not to say there's no place for unknowns in games, but when the unknown factor only exists for the first of potentially dozens of battles with that enemy, then the game's probably not designed to accommodate the unknown. Nor should it be. Hell, the first time you encounter an enemy already has plenty of unknowns that add volatility to the fight. Do we really need to maximize it like this? I suppose there's an argument that could be made that these initial encounters with an enemy are meant to be SP cost spikes, but there's plenty of better ways to balance SP cost, especially since that only works if you don't game over the first time. In that sense, it's actually sometimes a good thing to game over the first time you run into an enemy, so long as it hasn't been too long since your last save. If you do really want to preserve the hiddenness, like for realism's sake or some shit, then at least give me some tools for better dealing with the unknown. An item that scans the enemy, or a skill, or if you don't want just a free scan, then maybe an item or skill called, like, Tetra Tap that does very light damage of fire, ice, electric, and wind. And a Tetra Tap 2 for those other 4 elements, and I guess a Double Tap for physical and gun. At least that could speed things up a little while minimizing the risk. Or maybe Futaba and Morgana before her can scan them, but it takes time. She'll uncover their elemental resistances, but it'll take about 3 rounds of battle, or maybe a couple random elements are revealed each round. This would allow you some strategic choice when fighting something new. Is it worth throwing whatever elements you've got handy at the enemy and hoping you find a weakness, or should you buff up your defenses and turtle until Futaba gets you the intel? I don't know if that'd be the most engaging way to go about it, but at least you'd have an option that ain't fucking guess and check. I find it kinda sad that I can be sitting on over $1,000,000 yen and still not feel compelled to spend any of it on upgrading my equipment. Weapons only affect basic attacks and all-out attacks, which I guess makes thematic sense since those are the only times your characters actually swing their weapons, but mechanically this is very limiting to their value. It's not no value, but with how expensive weapons tend to be, it almost never feels like it would be worth it to upgrade. I mean, you'd definitely feel it if you had early game weapons in the late game, but the occasional upgrade you get from chests or the like are usually more than enough. Maybe if UI bought stuff back for more than a pitiful 20% of what he sells them for, but as it is, weapons either need to be way cheaper or way more impactful if they want me to give a damn about them. And then there's guns, which manage to be even more useless than the primary weapons. Other than knocking down things weak to gun and using Joker's free knockdown, I never use guns. The limited ammo kinda forces it to be that way. For the former, you generally only want to use one shot, which will be shit damage no matter how good your gun is. For the latter, it doesn't actually do any damage, just knocks the target down. This is one where I literally did have early game guns still equipped in the final dungeon, and it didn't fucking matter. To be fair, I've heard that unloading a clip at something can actually be pretty good damage, but because of the whole ammo thing, I just never saw much value in it. I suppose it could be kinda nice against bosses, and I hope that's true, because I got nothing else. Armor's a bit of an exception, or at least I want to think that it is. I've heard armor does affect most types of damage, so I've always kept my armor up to some degree, and with the way armor can be handed down, buying Joker a new top-of-the-line armor would at the very least be an upgrade for all the male party members. Of course, the shared nature of it also meant that I got enough in chests to keep everyone except maybe Morgana fairly well up to date. Still, armor is definitely the equipment type I spent the most on, except maybe for the SP adhesives. And that leads us to the SP adhesive accessory slot. That one begs for your money in the early game, then you get 4 SP adhesive 3s and nothing else matters. Of course, there is one use for those first 3 equipment types that I haven't mentioned yet. It's possible for all of them to come with an accessory-esque passive, which is generally what I prioritize when equipping everyone. I'd have liked to see more done with that, and I think an alternative use of the electric chair would have been a great way to do so. As is, the electric chair is basically just go into menu, see if you can make anything good. If you use a guide, you can get more out of it by actually seeking out the good stuff, but even then, each character only gets like 2 weapons and 2 guns, one of which is supposed to be their ultimate endgame equips. So other than maybe some nice skill cards and the occasional armor, you might be lucky enough to find that rare something cool for one of the characters before endgame. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, and it can even be kept more or less as is alongside what I want. But what I want is for executing your persona to add a bonus effect to the weapon, gun, or armor of your choice. Each persona could have a specific effect that it gives to each type of equipment. For instance, Pyro Jack could give a small fire damage buff to weapons, a small dodge chance against fire to armors, and a small chance to apply the burn status to guns. More generally, I think I'd give damage buffs, auto-kajas, crit buffs, and the like to weapons. Guns would be about applying statuses to enemies when attacked with the gun, status ailments, kundas, element breaks, etc. And armors would get element-based dodges and damage reductions, counters, ailment preventions, and various other defensive passives. Oh, and all 3 of them could get stat buffs. Now, I didn't forget the thing about new equipment rarely being worth buying. See, these bonuses can't just be put onto any piece of equipment. Every equip has an equip level, say 1 through 9, and each electric chair bonus has a required level to apply. So say you get yourself an Orthrus and see that it can give a stronger fire boost than you got from that Pyro Jack, but it requires a weapon level 4 and On is still whipping around a level 2. Congratulations, you now have a reason to buy a new weapon. Why are shadows retarded? Like, Ryuji and Morgana are standing next to each other. You have Garu. What do? Apparently the answer is flip a coin. Why? Why can they not make the obvious choice? I mean, I guess you could argue that they don't know your elemental resistances, just like you don't get to know theirs, but they don't learn either. Plus, I'm pretty sure there are some bosses that do go for your weaknesses, so the realism thing clearly isn't that important to the developers. But forget the realism aspect of it. What are the gameplay implications? In a word, randomness. More specifically, randomness in how harshly you get punished for mistakes. I don't think this is a good thing. It makes balancing the game, which is by nature one of the most difficult things to do well, even harder. If you want the missteps to feel like they're being punished on more than rare unlucky instances, you'd have to give enemies enough power to deal significant damage even without acting smartly. But that means when they do get lucky and act smartly, then you're pretty much just fucked, even if you didn't really make any mistakes. Conversely, if you want to avoid a little bad luck resulting in major consequences, you have to make it so that enemies are laughably useless against you anytime they don't get lucky. At least Persona 5 lets you pick which one of these you want with the difficulty setting, for the early game. It tends to be laughably easy in the late game no matter which difficulty you select, but, well, like I said, balancing games is hard. Though I do think enemy AI would be a great way to make the higher difficulties harder, assuming you don't want to make the enemy smart on all difficulties. So how might things get better if enemies acted more intelligently? Well, for one, there'd be a lot less discussions on message boards with somebody complaining about how the game is bullshit because it got an undeserved game over due to bad luck, and then a bunch of people responding that it wasn't bad luck, they just need to make sure they're prepared for whatever it was that kicked their ass. This is a somewhat common discussion from what I've seen, and honestly, both sides are right in a way. There usually is something that could be done to protect against anything and everything the game can throw at you. But on the other hand, if failing to protect against something only creates at most a 5% chance that you'll lose a fight, ignoring it simply means you might occasionally have to try 2 or 3 times to make it to the next safe room. The game doesn't make you learn from your mistakes. It fully allows people to put all blame for their loss on the game, do nothing to actually improve their chances, and still win on the next attempt. And if that's likely to work, then is it really worth the effort to find a way to protect against every little thing that can kill you? To some people it is, simply because they get satisfaction over knowing they've successfully found a way to plug that particular leak, even if it never would have actually sunk them again. But in terms of time and effort spent, there's probably more than a few instances where it's actually more efficient to simply try again and hope you don't get unlucky. If the game deliberately kicks your ass when you leave an opening though, then you'll have to learn and adapt. If people, on rare occasion, lose because an enemy happened to throw a Mudo at Joker, they'll feel like they got screwed over by the RNG. If that same enemy throws its Mudo at Joker every chance it gets, people will quickly learn that that's something they need to adapt to. And that brings me to a quick point I want to add about the game over condition. I actually think I'd be a lot less against the main character game over mechanic if enemies were aware of it and focused Joker whenever they could. If an enemy can hit Joker's weakness, they do. And give enemies bonus damage after a knockdown like you get with baton passes. Then, if they can hit someone other than Joker's weakness, they do that first, then use the buffed attack on Joker. I feel like if they did this, it would make protecting Joker specifically feel a lot more like a strategic component of the battle system, and a lot less like a mechanic designed to randomly fuck you up the ass from time to time. Part of me wonders if this high amount of randomness and punishing mistakes is actually intended by the developers. Like, they want people who do protect against everything the game can throw at them to be able to more or less avoid ever seeing the game over screen, but then they also don't want people who don't put in the time and effort to protect themselves to be unable to get through the game. Like, preparing only lowers your chance of getting a game over, but even if you play like shit, you can reach the end if you try enough times. And I guess that kinda made sense back before they realized that they could actually let you change the difficulty of the game whenever you damn well please, but, well, you can now, so cut this shit out, okay? I mean, I hope I'm wrong about this, and the highly randomized difficulty isn't actually by design. Can't help but wonder, though. Knocking down enemies by hitting them with weaknesses or criticals is a central component of Persona 5's battle system. Unless you're fighting a boss. Okay, sure, there are some bosses that can be knocked down, but there are also more than a couple that not only have no weakness, but are even immune to criticals. Ignoring the poor bastards that waste turn after turn miracle punching the bosses because the game doesn't fucking tell you they can't be crit, I find it rather annoying and dumb when games cut a key mechanic out of boss fights. Though, I guess they didn't completely cut it out. The bosses can still knock you on your ass. Honestly, I'm not even sure why this is the case. It's not like it'd be that game breaking to knock the bosses down. If anything, I'd say getting an all-out attack or a 5th turn for whichever party member you choose would add to the depth of boss strategy. And if that means you get to burn through their health faster, give the boss some more health. Hell, I'd want knocking down to be even more important than it is. Bring back that thing the other games did where hitting a downed enemy with their weakness would inflict dizzy, causing them to lose a turn. And if that makes bosses too easy, give them 3 or 4 turns each round, and then robbing one of those turns from them will be all but necessary. And speaking of bosses' multiple turns, I think those would be better if they were spread out instead of the boss having one burst of turns each round. As it is, a boss either kills you in a single turn burst, or you can easily heal up before the next one. You can usually rebuff and debuff as needed too. The only real difference is how much damage you put out, which leads to boss battles effectively being a race between the boss's health bar and your party's SP bars. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, but it'd be nice if things were a little less routine along the way. Imagine a late game boss that got a turn after each one of your party members, but you could remove a turn by double tapping their weakness, or a baton pass to give the desired teammate a chance to act. This would certainly make hitting weaknesses important, and it would also create a lot more interesting strategic moments during fights, as each character in your party would have to react to the enemy's attacks. This would also make items a lot more valuable, which I kinda like, especially those elemental attack items you can craft. Anyway, just some thoughts I had on making boss fights more interesting. So those are my shorter battle-related topics. What do you think? Want more guess and check in your games? Appreciate not having to spend your precious yen on equipment? Think enemies should stay stupid? And bosses steadfast on their feet? Any other battle-related things that you think could be improved? Let me know and have an awesome day. It's great that the game lets me retry boss fights. Seriously, much appreciated. I just wish I could access the menu between attempts. Swap my party around, use some SP items, maybe even change the difficulty if I need to. You're halfway there, now just take that last step in the next game.